Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast, where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. I want to thank you for following and subscribing to our podcast and sharing these inspirational stories from my guests. And these conversations have been shared all over the world thanks to you. And it's amazing the hope and inspiration and guidance that it can offer to our listeners all over the globe. And I love hearing your responses and I love seeing your ratings and reviews. So thank you so much. It means the world. But let's continue the conversation with our next guest. So, in today's episode, I'm joined by someone very special whose work beautifully blends leadership with deep personal insight. James Sweetman is an executive and life coach, motivational speaker, podcast host, and author. For over 2 decades, he has guided individuals and organizations in unlocking their true potential through soulful leadership, authentic communication, and self awareness. He is also the host of the powerful podcast Your Time with James Sweetman, where he shares reflections and conversations that are both thought provoking and heart opening. James has a gift for holding space, whether it's in a boardroom, on stage, or in a coaching session, and helping people reconnect with who they truly are beneath the roles, responsibilities, and routines of life. In his latest book, Words to Inspire, James explores 60 themes from feeling stuck to coping with change and helping us reconnect with what's truly important in our lives. James, you are very welcome.
Oh gosh, it's an absolute pleasure, Sharon, and thank you for those lovely words.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. So, James and myself connected as I was a guest on his podcast a while ago, but we
Yes.
connected on Social Media Fest, which was organized by Samantha Kelly. And James very kindly sent me a note after my talk. And it really, really, James, and I've said that to you, it touched me because I thought people are busy with lives and their own businesses and doing what they want and getting themselves out there. But for someone to take a moment to write a note to say they enjoyed your talk or whatever it is, if somebody said, "Oh, James, your conversation on that podcast really inspired me," that means so much, no matter where we are in our lives or our business, that small moment of kindness really strikes a chord. So I am so grateful
Oh
that.
gosh, you're more than welcome, Sharon. And it was so how would I say it? It felt guided. I think as someone who speaks and writes and coaches and all of that, it is wonderful. I know what it's like to receive some words of recognition back. And because sometimes we don't know the ripple effects of our work. And so I like to acknowledge that, but particularly with yourself, without this sounding a little bit too deep, I can just recognize another member of the soul tribe. It's like I have to know this woman. I think we've got a lot to say to each other and a lot to discuss. And I think that has proven to be the case. So when you were kind enough to join me on my podcast at the end of the last series, and I think it was one of the most popular episodes ever, I need to get that in
Mm.
there. um, and of course, we touched on your book and that as well. Um, um, it was a really special conversation,
Mm.
and it's one of the episodes I've listened to back several times myself because each time I was getting something different from it. Because
Mm.
as you would know, sometimes when you're hosting a podcast, it's like, where's this going? What's next? You mightn't get necessarily get the richness of
Yeah.
what was explored, and that was certainly the case with yourself. So
No.
happy to be on the other side of the desk today.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's testament to you because to me it was a very soulful and heart-led conversation. And it again felt like we were the only two people that we're in that conversation. And then I suppose, as you said, the ripple effect it going out and people listening to this conversation and how it has resonated with them. I think only last week, even, or this week, I received a message from somebody that was listening to our conversation on your podcast. And she was barefoot in the garden, listening again, taking notes. And I thought, wow, that is
Yeah.
the power of sharing our own stories,
Yes.
our experiences, and the insights that we have learned through our experiences. And that's why I wanted to share a conversation with you on my podcast so that my listeners could hear from your wonderful life experience. So, James, I know from listening to your podcast that your father was a farmer because
That's right.
you talk about the seeds of inspiration, which is part of your community members
Yes.
now. And I thought that was so beautiful because, again, our environment does shape us as we grow. So, growing up, I suppose, in a farming background for you, what was the expectation, or was there an expectation of you, or of yourself, or of your family, of who you were going to be?
There's a question. My goodness. Yeah, I grew up in rural North County Dublin, and people can forget it's less so now, but certainly back in the 70s and 80s, there is big rural parts to North County Dublin. So I grew up just outside of Skerries, and my mum is still out there, and I pop out to see her at least once a week. And we lost my dad during COVID times, not to COVID. He had pancreatic cancer, but it was a COVID funeral, and the extra challenges that went with that. But I'm the eldest of four. And I think probably typically, Sharon, as the eldest, I'm the responsible one, or was. As my dad said to me later in life, he said I had it the toughest. It's like I was the mold breaker. If I wanted to go out to a party or a disco or something, it was like, I was the one putting the hand on the door, as it were. Um, I think one of the things looking back on it that I certainly learned from both my parents, because my mom, like so many women around the country, she was a stay-at-home mom and a stay-at-home farmer's wife who did the accounts and who did so much behind the scenes that she would never describe herself as a businesswoman. But that's what she was as well. She ran the admin of the business and wages and all of that sort of thing. And I learned from them a very strong work ethic, a very strong work ethic. I was out picking spuds from the age of 7 during summer holidays. And I go back and I sort of think, did I miss out on holidays or leisure time or whatever else? But when we meet up now, and unfortunately it's often at funerals with the cousins and the other maybe kids of a similar age who are out picking spuds during the summer, we have great laughs and great memories. And we had to earn the pocket money, etc. Um, as regards expectation, my dad never wanted me to take over the farm, and probably just as well, Sharon. There's Abraham Hicks. I'm sure you've come across Abraham Hicks, and speaks often about contrast. And contrast is, what do I want more of and what do I want less of? I knew from my middle teens that I did not want to be a farmer. I wanted to work in an office. That was the only ambition I had. I wanted to work in an office. I didn't want to be out in all weathers. And I think my dad, was a small enough holding, in later years, sort of combined with an uncle of mine to try to make it viable. But that farming business was changing. I knew there wasn't really a future in it. It was like, go big or go bust, I think was the phrase. It wasn't in it for any of us. But the other thing that, when I think back on my younger years, both of my parents had left school by the age of 14. And that was maybe more typical of those times in the 1950s. And I was the first one in the family, obviously, to complete secondary school. I'd no one to ask about homework, and there was no AI and there was no Google and there was nothing else. Um, Whereas my parents invested so much in me and my siblings, and we've gone on to have careers in different things, and even from an educational point of view, like I have two masters. My sister is a doctorate in education. From parents who sacrificed a lot for us. Like we didn't miss out on school tours or any of those things in the 1980s, but we didn't realize we were protected from how challenging my folks had it. And I think certainly I feel it, and I certainly think my siblings probably feel it as well, that we only ever wanted to make them proud. And too much of that, of course, is not so good either, but we wanted to make them proud. And I remember one of the, when my father was dying, one of the last things he had said to me was, "James, I'm so proud of you." And I didn't realize I had to wait until I was 50 to hear it. It was a real departure gift, because he would be a man of a generation who wouldn't have expressed that directly, whereas he'd speak to everyone else about what we were doing or had done. But to hear that was one of many, let's call it, departure gifts. Yeah. So I probably rabbited on a bit there, but your question had prompted that, Sharon. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's lovely because, our podcasts are not just questions and answers. They're looking back, and sometimes when we're sharing our own story, we sometimes don't get an opportunity to talk about those
Yeah.
important things, the topics that some people want to brush over and just get to the good stuff and where your career is and what you're doing now. But I always feel it is through that environment of growing up, of what challenged us, who encouraged us, where it led us, what we feel or believe, that challenged us in those times, that gave us the strength and resilience. And, when I heard you talking about your father, I could hear you talking with great pride.
Yes.
And also, when you were just saying there now, waiting till, you're in your 50s to hear him say how proud he was of you, that even with all the achievement and everything that you've achieved in your life, James, that still how important that was. And we go back to the recognition,
Mm.
and that we are seen,
Mm.
and that people recognize how hard we have worked, and in particular the ones that are closest to you. As you said, which is a real Irish thing, for Irish parents, they'll tell all the neighbours,
Oh,
the
yes.
ones in the shop, and the doctor and everybody how well the children are doing, but they never say it to the children.
Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
it amazing?
It is amazing, but how would I say, when I think of it, say even with my mom, and she's not going through the best of health at the minute, but we wouldn't, I see it, say, with my siblings and their kids, they'll use the word "I love you" quite frequently. That has never been exchanged between me and my parents, but it is exchanged in every other way. Every cup of tea when you go in the door,
Mm.
every phone call, every text, we've just arrived down in Kerry, we got here safe. All of that is the lived "I love you."
Yeah. And is it important now to you, James, after looking back and wait until you're in your 50s, for someone to say, "I'm proud of you"? Is it really important for you now to be able to express that yourself, and also to have it expressed to you by, obviously your husband, but by
Mhm.
other people? And like you sending me that note,
Mm.
as I said, people may think, but sure, it was just a note to say,
Mm.
whatever. But to me, it was a beautiful expression of recognition. And we should say that we don't need recognition.
Yeah.
But I think as humans, we do. We all want to be seen and heard.
Yes.
And sometimes it's a stranger, like you were a
Yes.
stranger to me that time, that sent me that note, and it was amazing. But is it also important for us to remind ourselves that in order to receive it, that we have to be able to give that recognition also?
Yeah, I think that's the tricky part. I often, yes, we all want to be seen, heard, understood, that we matter. We all want that. Um, but sometimes we have to work on making a home for it. So if I haven't made a home for it and someone gives me good feedback, I've no place to put it.
Mm.
I can't recognize the recognition, Sharon.
I like that.
We'll discount it, because of course, as humans, we're negatively skewed. It's part of our defense mechanism. So we can ignore positive feedback, and there is no consequences if we do.
Mm.
We cannot ignore negative feedback because there might be consequences if we do. It's like, oh, there's fraudulent activity on your credit card. I can't ignore that.
No.
Even though sometimes we do now because it's spam more likely.
Yeah.
Um, that I know for me, the tricky bit is to acknowledge what I do well regularly. And I think that's true of many people because we're hot-wired for like what's next or where am I going or the to-do list, the should list, all of that. Rarely do we look back and acknowledge how far we've come. And I think that's part of, again, our hot wiring because it's how we're naturally programmed to grow and evolve as people.
Mm.
The opposite of which is the frustration that can come when we feel stuck in a rut and our comfort zones calcify and all of that. But we're having to work against things like better the devil you know and, sitting where you are. But I often find, though, particularly in my work with clients, and a lot of the clients that I work with might find themselves in career transition or they're not sure as to what's next. And they're often looking for more clarity. And there's two things I'd share with them. One is that you're already on a certain trajectory. There's been a certain path to your life. It won't necessarily be linear. Usually it's cyclical. There's ups and downs and swings and roundabouts and different seasons, but there's usually a progression forward with it. The other thing that that we're often looking for as well, when we think we're looking for clarity, Sharon, is certainty. Certainty as to what the next steps will be.
Mm.
But what I've found is clarity is not certainty because life doesn't work that way. Like if everything was certain and organized and fixed, and although the controlling part of us would love that, life
Mm.
would be too boring. Like
Yeah.
there's no creativity, there's no expansion and exploration and curiosity. So therefore, clarity as I see it is the quality of our seeing. And for me, the quality of our seeing is also acknowledging what we do well regularly. So most of us can, put our hands up and be fully paid up members of the Toughen Ourselves Club. But how would I say it? We'd also view ourselves as being honest people, and being honest is also recognizing what I did well, what I'm doing well, what turned out well, the challenges I've overcome, the little bits of achievement that I have. Not in a way that we're solely focused on it, but we're just not discounting it because I think that's where I suppose it is an Irish trait as well. We just discount it all, and I
Mm.
think it's too valuable to discount.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And when you're talking about clarity, it's something I say myself a lot and I use with my clients. You keep saying it and I'm like, wow. So clarity to me as well, just as you're saying it, I'm thinking out loud now, James,
Mm,
that clarity is not just about seeing, I suppose, all that we've achieved and where
mm,
we are, but it's also seeing what's not working well for us and
mm.
recognizing when we're resisting or pushing away, or, it's seeing both sides of it, and being clear about that, isn't it? And because again, if we talk about social media and we talk about everyone shows up and shows the best side of themselves, but in order for us to have balance in our life, we also have to show the challenges that we are facing or have faced. Now, you talk about that quite a lot, on your podcast as well,
Yeah.
which I think is inspiring because
Yes.
you're talking about, where we could enhance our creativity and, and even about clear communication and intuition. All of those things I think should be encouraged more, which I know you're doing in your work.
Mm,
And that's why I think I connected so deeply with you. It's because for me, it is, as you know, soul led and it's
yeah.
heart led. So if you're doing that in your own life, and we're being honest and real about what we see clearly within our own challenges, whether that be personal, professional, then we can bring that into our working role and show
Yeah.
up authentically.
Yes, because it's lived experience.
Yeah.
I know, and again, you probably know this too, Sharon. I feel uncomfortable, although you mightn't tell by listening to me. I can feel uncomfortable sharing too much personal things, you know. But I know the parts that resonate most with clients and with listeners on the podcasts are my expressions of vulnerability because everyone can see themselves mirrored in it. And one of the podcast episodes that I did a good while ago that had the most listeners was one I felt really uncomfortable doing. Now I've learned that that's a signpost, but it was one where I said I'm having to pause the podcast and everything else because I was, for want of a better phrase, burnt out.
Mhm.
This was in 21, and there had been the journey of my dad's illness and death. So there was a lot of grief.
Mhm.
I've had my own health challenges. Thankfully, I'm at the far side of them, mainly with bladder cancer and skin cancer. There was another uncle that died, and I was the executor of the estate, and he lived in my mom's family home. It fell to me to sell that after 4 generations. Throw in a pandemic, throw in here where we had a burst pipe at the house and we had to move out for 6 months. You know, that's just life. But they're all the things that are not found on that biography, you know, that's read out. As I said to you just before we came on air, that's the front door, you know, with a beautiful garland on it. But in Ireland, we're more interested when we visit that we will go around the back and go in the back door and sit down at the kitchen. And that's what I aim for when I'm working with clients. It's something that's much more real.
Yeah.
And I think in the age of social media, people are crying out for what is real because all you see online is the glossy show reel, the different spelling of the word real or double EL. And I think, and I do know from listening to your podcast, it's the same approach. Um,
Mm.
and that's what resonates with people.
Yeah, I love that. And I had said, James said, that the biography was, the front door. And he said, we're going around the back door now. I said, I'm going into your kitchen cupboards now, James, with this conversation. And I love that you've mentioned, the realness of the challenges that you faced in your own life, because I know we had chatted, even before your podcast about what you had gone through in your own personal life. And it makes me go back to, because as I said to James, it's one of the episodes on your podcast that I love is when you met your younger self for coffee. And I said to James, I'm going to talk about it again because I listened to it again. I've told him it's probably about my 10th time to listen to it. And every time I listen to it, it helps me to connect with another aspect of my younger self. And you can go back and listen to my conversation with James because I talk about my younger self quite a lot and she is my hero.
Mm,
But it was listening about your younger self. And in that conversation, and you were so right about your vulnerability
mm,
because you shared, it was like you were opening up your heart and you were revealing parts of yourself, not just to the listeners, but also to yourself
mm.
in doing so. And even the soundscape, was it Alex Balfe, I think, was it? Or
Evan Belf, yes,
Evan Balfe, excuse
all
me, Evan.
all the technical things that I cannot do. Yes, he put in the soundscape of a coffee shop.
I love that because it
Mm,
added to that vision within the mind and recreating that scene and that conversation, which was you meeting your 18-year-old self. It was so powerful. Oh, I have the shivers even thinking about it again now. But what I loved was you looking at him and saying you realized that you loved him.
yeah.
I just thought, oh my God, James, stop it, because I'm going to be in tears again
Oh,
listening to this.
oh, I they're not too far away, Sharon.
Yeah.
That piece was inspired. I came across it on Instagram. An American lady, Janae Cecilia, I think is her name, and it was a she's a poem. It was a poem she wrote. I met my younger self for coffee at 10:15, and sometimes you come across lines. You know the way it's a book or a quote or something, and it's like it just sticks. There was something about that that's like, and I could see then online that it had sparked people to do little pieces on their own meeting their younger self. And we've often come across, I don't know if it's a typical coaching question or whatever, if you could send some advice back to yourself, what would you send? And it's in that field, but I sat down with it and I journaled on it, and things came to me that I didn't expect would. Um, um, Probably I think it's touched on in that piece. I started to write a diary, Sharon, on the 1st of January, 1986. I was 15 and a half, and I have written that end of day diary entry every day since. So we're approaching 40 years of diary writing.
Wow.
So I didn't go back to those leaving cert, intercert, leaving cert, James, waiting for CAO results or whatever, going for the first job interview. I didn't read any of those for this piece, but they're all still inside me. All of all the aspects of who we were are still here within us. Plus, if we go deep, all the ones we're yet to become are still here within us. But I could somehow see who I was back then, and um, how he would have felt meeting me now. And he would have been amazed because, the 18-year-old James lived in a very different Ireland.
Mm.
I was 22 before homosexuality was decriminalized. Um, it was the age of AIDS and the fear that went with that, and what was preached from pulpits.
Mm.
And somehow on the inside, remember earlier I was saying about you have to make a home for recognition.
Mm.
I had no way of acknowledging the fact that I was gay. I had no reference points. The only reference point I think was what's his name, who did the Generation game, Larry Grayson.
Oh.
I used to be the only reference point in the 1980s. Now it's like, it's everywhere.
Mm.
And I can see it with the generation after me. But, I was 34 before I came out. Um, I met my now husband, Brian, when I was 37. We're obviously of a similar age, but we've often said to each other that we would not recognize it. We wouldn't have recognized each other if we had met earlier. We had to grow and develop. And I think that's what, and come to terms with ourselves. I wrote an article around the time I came out, which was something like, I think everyone needs to come out.
Mm.
Because, gosh, I'm going personal, Sharon. You're a good podcast host. The Oprah has nothing on you. The uh, how would I say it? For me, growing up, and part of it was the diary writing, and the other writing was I was a great observer because I felt I was observing life, not living it.
Mm.
So therefore, you can notice things, um, and you're forced to look inwards as well. And certainly for me, my levels of emotional intelligence are probably innate, but I've certainly worked on personal development and my own growth over the years. And that has stood me in good stead, because when the challenges come, and by God they do, doesn't make life any easier, but somehow you've got a little bit more of a grounding because you're standing in your own truth.
Mm.
And I remember going to an event um, in 2004 in the UK, one of these personal development type conferences, and you were given a little wristband for attending the event. And it became so clear to me when I came out of that event that nothing in my life can move forward until I start fully owning who I am and having those conversations around the kitchen table that I had avoided before. Not just for me, but for my parents and siblings as well, because um, I wanted them to get to know all of me.
Mm.
Um, and I said, I'm not taking off this wristband until I've had the conversations. So it will either be cut off or it will rot off because it's not coming off until I have it. And that was I still remember all of that vividly. That was going as deep into my reserves of courage as I have ever done. And that includes all the hospital stuff I've had in recent times. And my life went from black and white to color within the space of a few weeks back in October '04. And going back to the spark for that stream of thought, um, my younger self would never have even imagined that that was possible.
Wow. Oh, I have to take a breath. That's really powerful. And I think that's what I could see and feel in that conversation. I felt like I was sitting in that cafe, but earwigging
Yeah.
to your conversation with your younger self, but I couldn't take my ears away from it, even though it was deeply personal. I knew that you were sharing something very profound, not just for the listeners, but for yourself, and revealing so much of yourself that it was just as you've said, you had observed many other people
Mm.
all through your life, but it was like you were now really witnessing the challenges that your younger self had faced and had the courage to grow into you, the wonderful
Yeah.
James Sweetman.
Yeah. And how would I say it? I would love for his life to have been a little easier.
Mm.
Um, but it forged me into who I am. So I was bullied in school, certainly around the age of 14 and 15. Um, Never pleasant, but I never shared that with my parents at the time.
Why not?
I never shared it with them.
Mm.
And I've only learned this subsequently through counseling work, Sharon.
Mm.
I didn't want to burden them. They had enough to be dealing with. They had three younger kids to me, and my dad's business, the farming was not easy. They didn't need more burdens from me. Plus, the other boys, as it were, this is going back to recognition. They could probably recognize for who I was, and I didn't even know.
Mm.
Simple things like, there was end of school exams, and, you threw your jacket on the back of the chair, and whoever was beside me had written faggot across the back of this new wine colored bomber jacket that I was so proud of. I went to the toilets and I tried to scrub it out. It wouldn't come out. I lost the jacket, and then was scolded for losing the jacket.
You could tell why.
No, because that would mean something else. You
Oh,
know,
James.
and that's just one example of some of the challenges the younger James went through. But certainly the catalyst for, let's call it, you know, certainly early career success. And I had a lot of early career success. It's like, success is the best revenge.
Mm.
That certainly worked for me until it didn't.
Yeah.
It was like the rocket fuel got me going, and um, how would I say it? I suppose to bring that story full circle, I went back to my 20-year school reunion, which is about 20 years ago now, Sharon, which is scary. And I was a different James back then. I was a different James at the school reunion.
How
um,
did you show up, James? Did you now, and be honest, did you go in the door, cock of
with
the
a rainbow scarf and I went in um, not caring what other people thought of me. And that is a great space to be in. Not from the place of cockiness or narcissism or disrespect, or arrogance, not from that place, but just from a groundedness within yourself. And it's like, I was scared of you 20 years ago.
Mm.
I ain't now. And I would certainly have the language skills and the self confidence to deal with you.
Mm.
Um, but of course, what you found was the people who gravitate to you are now on the same energy wavelength, and there was a nice bit of catch up with people I wanted to catch up with, and then there was a few other people that seeing them once every 20 years was probably more than sufficient.
Hi, bye. Yeah, James. And I think of that as many people, just as you said, and I'm sure there's people now that will be listening to this and they go, "Oh my God, I avoided my school reunions
Yeah.
because of the way I was treated or what I
Yes.
experienced." And they still haven't found that courage or self-confidence or belief in themselves. So growing up as a gay man in Ireland was tough enough.
Yeah.
But growing up and not having, I suppose, and the way you say it is not wanting to be a burden
Yes.
to your parents was also a burden on you, as you
Yes.
know. So carrying all of that in your young little mind and heart and doing so well for yourself, is it like that you put the energy in? And I'm just asking you this, is
Mm.
it that you put all of the energy in to becoming successful and because you're so successful in your career, was that part of a distraction from how you were actually feeling about yourself?
Yes. Yes. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Mm.
Um, I was very committed to my career, my warm-up career, as I sometimes phrase
Yeah.
it, where I worked in financial services. I didn't go to college. I went straight from the Leave and Cert. You got the pensionable job, Sharon, if you could, um, in August 88, and advanced up the rungs of the ladder. And I was 28, managing a department of 80 people, and had a trajectory there. Um, but certainly between 98 and the year 2000 was what I was getting sick. I mean, more colds, more stomach upsets, more sore throats. Now I can look back on it and see this as dis-ease.
Hmm.
But at the time, I just thought it was an annoyance. And uh, my brother had gotten married in 99. My sister had gotten married in 2000. And I remember house sitting their new house when they went off on honeymoon. And I remember sort of thinking, there in that house by myself one night and thinking, there's my sister and she's, found happiness, and my brother and they have someone and I don't have anyone. I didn't have a particularly wide circle of friends. Um, because I think, as mad as it may sound, I'm not naturally an extrovert. Sometimes it can be difficult in social context. Throw in the gay stuff as well, where I'm not interested in pubs and football and stuff like that wasn't my thing. Give me a book any day and I'll curl up with it. So I was lonely, and the work place I was in was going through a merger. They had asked me to write my job description in the merged company with a salary of six figures at age 30. And I went, there was something in me that said, get out. It's like, I don't want this. There was no sense of energy or excitement. All I could see was more burden for the next 3 or 4 years ahead. And it's a question now that I wish I had back then. But it's a question now I often ask myself, and I will ask of clients as well when they feel stuck, overloaded, overwhelmed, confused, burdened. what would feel like relief.
Mm.
And I remember back then having a very tearful conversation with my mom because she knew something was up. And this was nothing to do with the gay conversation. That was a few years down the road yet because I wasn't even ready for that. But I said, I can't keep going the way I'm going. And she said, what would help? I said, I need to step out of work. And I made that decision thinking I was letting everyone down and my director was dependent on me, etc., etc. And all I could tell you, Sharon, was it was like years of weight was lifted from my shoulders. And I did at age 30. What many kids now do at age 20 is I went off and traveled. The difference being I had a bit of money in my pocket. I did a trip around the world and I took sabbatical and I never went back. I never went back. And I remember being at a bookstore. I'll always gravitate to bookstores in Manly, Australia, just on the outskirts of Sydney, going into what was then called the self-help section, and picking up a book, Be Your Own Life Coach by Fiona Harold, which I can actually see over there, my old well-thumbed copy. And I hadn't come across coaching as a topic other than say sports coaching or something. But you know, when you get the right book at the right time, I went back into the store to get a biro from them because I was underlining sitting out in the park.
Mm.
And that was the start of something new. As I often say, I had to go to the other side of the world to find the next step. Now I can apply the thinking of the Steve Jobs Stanford address. Looking back, you can see the dots and you can see the pattern. So when I did my MBA, I did my thesis on motivation, and even as the 18-year-old, I was pulling 10 tips for being a presenter, out of the back of magazines. I could see the pattern to it,
Yeah.
and then things began to dovetail, and I moved into it's not quite encore career. That might be the next one, but the middle career. Which was aligned with who I am. As I often say, I won the career lotto, Sharon, because if I did win the lotto after a bit of a splurge and maybe another trip around the world, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. And that is a gift.
You are a gift. You are a gift. And listening to you, and as I said, in your beautiful honesty, and to take another breath, because that's what I feel for me. It's a moment to pause, James, and a moment to take it in, because it's deeply personal what you're sharing. And I know you share lots of different things on your own podcast, but I think having the opportunity for someone to ask you those questions
Mm,
and for you to really express out loud, I still feel younger James needs to be heard from more, and what he went through, what he had courage to change, what he felt burdened with,
mm.
and how he still found a way to find
Yeah,
himself.
yeah. I remember sharing with someone recently because, like, there were dark times. There are times when you're crying into your pillow at night, and it's the stuff that people don't see, and we all have those challenges. But somehow there was always a little flicker of a light in me. Whether that's called faith, I don't know. But I do have a strong faith. I often say I don't have blind faith, but I do have a strong faith that what's that old phrase? Life is not happening to us, it's happening for us, and life is happening with us.
Mm.
And, let me do my best, let me do my bit here and hand the rest over.
Mm.
Um, and I still feel that. I still believe that. Say if we go back to recent health challenges and stuff like that, into that challenging time, Sharon, I would put how COVID wiped out my business. And that's not unique to me. That's unique to many people. But or that's relevant for many people. But it forced me to again reassess, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's not just let's have this ticking over and do the group workshops on this, that, and the
Mm.
other. It's like, the business terminology was, oh, is it time to pivot and whatever else? And maybe that is true. But funnily enough, looking back on it, even back to pre-health issues that I had, there was an element of me getting bored with the same old. And part of that reassessment then was the podcast. And in an ongoing way, it's the new membership community. It's new ways of telling stories, maybe, but it's something much more heartfelt. Whereas previously, my work was, let's call it, quite corporate. Um, Still done in a heart-led way, I would like to
Mm.
think. Um, but I think, again, it goes back to, I think nowadays people are looking for realness and authenticity. And how will people find you unless you show up that way, is sort of how
Yes.
I operate. And I did a piece recently around, how many of us can feel tired of the constant hustle. That's an American phrase, go out there and hustle for business. And it's like, that's too much energy. No, thank you.
I
No,
can't
thank you.
hustle anymore.
No, 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 no. How about, you know, putting the time and effort into resonating with people, resonating on a certain vibration so that people will find you rather than hustling for business. Or if you're running and chasing, well, they're running from you. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not, that cliched phrase of law of attraction, but it is about, how would I say it? Recognizing, back to that word again, recognizing how you add value. And the one thing that cannot be replicated anywhere, your own competitive advantage, for want of a better phrase, is your own unique combination of personality, experience, strengths, aptitude, that lived experience piece. No one can replicate that. And it's about just stepping a little further into that space. Yeah, because and again, sharing with clients, and particularly sharing with creative clients, it's like, there are people waiting for the authentic you to show up, and
Yeah.
they will continue to wait until you show up. And I would often use that analogy, say, with my husband Brian. In personal life stuff, we were waiting for each other,
No.
but the time scale was years over here before we could see each other.
Yeah. Because first we have to see ourselves, and that does change, doesn't it,
Yeah,
James, over time and over our experiences through those challenges and struggles, and also the joys and the great, beautiful things that happen in our lives also. But if we can't recognize ourselves, how can we
it's someone else.
recognize?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I think for you and Brian, which is just so beautiful, because I know when you had an Instagram post up about getting married in New York and you were celebrating, but we go back to the struggles that you faced as that young person, not being able to be openly gay, not being able to speak to your family, believing you were a burden on it, struggling with, your own personal identity and how to show up in the world.
yeah.
So, but because of that struggle, and that's why I want to see the balance and let other people, I hope I'm making it clear,
Mm.
because of that personal struggle and that sense of identity, it also forged you into this really successful, educated person
Yeah.
also. So sometimes the struggles in our lives do lead us on a different path. It can be a parallel path, and
Mm.
you think, oh, I was going through the worst time. But then you look at all that you've actually achieved on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think there's the phrase, what is it? Challenges activate latent potential.
There you go.
Without constraint, we won't get relief. So, you know, short term or long term, if there's tensions, if there's restraints, if there's overwhelm, that's like the crucible in which we are forged, or it's the chrysalis.
Mm.
The thing people forget with the chrysalis, of course, Sharon, is when the caterpillar goes into it, it dissolves into a messy goo of cells.
Yes,
And,
beautiful.
and we know what that feels like some of the time. And the butterfly can only emerge when the time is right, otherwise the wings are weak, etc., etc. Um, so yes, challenges activate latent potential. There was something else when you were speaking there about forging it. Yeah, again, without being sort of too cliched with it, but it is something that resonates with me. It's a bit like, polishing the stone. It's getting rid of a few rough edges. I certainly know that, and I am certainly, I'm not the finished article. We're always learning and growing.
Yeah.
And Brian will certainly see aspects of me that would not appear in a podcast. This morning it was complaining about my back emptying the dishwasher, and all the real life stuff. Or when I'm going off catastrophizing about something, as I can do every so often. He'd say to me, James, and what advice would you give one of your clients? And I would go,
Yeah,
I need to hear that now. Anyway, I just need a hug.
I love it.
um, and he keeps my feet firmly on the ground, as it were. But it's that the challenges. It takes off the sharp edges. And I remember my late dad, God love him. We were both in hospital at the same time, both dealing with cancer. My poor mother was going from one floor to the other floor, and I remember I was let out after a few days and after treatment, and I felt so bad because he wasn't leaving with us. But when I went up to say goodbye, he said, on that day, I always remember saying to me, he said, James, you're not the most patient person in the world, but you've been a patient here now for the last few days, and maybe out of this, you will be more compassionate and you'll be a little bit less tough on yourself. And again, it's, they were not the sort of conversations we had, and the man had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And, but that stayed with me, that piece around compassion, that has been so much more front and center for me, Sharon, in the last few years since that was voiced. And it's obviously, the self-compassion bit can be the challenging part, a bit like recognition. We can be
Mm.
compassionate to others, or we can recognize others. Let's be compassionate to ourselves, and be a little bit more gentle with ourselves, which I think is a theme of all of our podcast episodes. um, and I was reminded only recently with a guy I met, and I know particularly in the States, you see people advertising shops or something, and they're wearing sandwich boards. I think that's the phrase
Yes.
for it. This way to Vodafone or
Mhm.
whatever. And I sort of thought, what would it be like if everyone we met had a visible sandwich board that outlined what they have dealt with and are currently dealing with, and how much more compassionately we would interact with them when we can visibly see what they are dealing with. Um,
Mm.
whether it's empty nest syndrome, dealing with skin cancer, a dying parent, a troubled teenager, an eating disorder, whatever it is, if it was more visible, how much more compassionate would be to others. And because we don't know what people are carrying. And that's something that I have, how would I say it? I've remembered to remember in the
Yeah.
last little while. Doesn't mean I don't get frustrated when someone is pulled out in front of me in traffic,
Mm.
but I will see the thought coming in and say, well, I don't know what they're dealing with. Maybe they're rushing to get to a hospital. Who
Mm.
knows? Um, and for me, that goes back to a bigger piece where, the world is challenged, and it is so easy to despair at the minute.
Mm.
Um, but if we're looking to if we're looking to see more peace in the world, the only way I can do that, or where I can start doing that, is bringing peace into myself.
Mm.
And that piece around compassion for me helps with that. So if I'm a more compassionate, more peaceful person, I have brought more compassion and more peace into the world.
Mm. Absolutely. And then on reflection of that, sandwich board, and if
Yes.
everybody was more outward about the struggles they're going through, it makes me come back to a little bit about, again, going back to the bullying or, all of the things we've experienced in our youth. Do people have to say they're struggling? Do they have to show to justify that they're feeling whatever they're feeling at that moment? Because is it not, and this was where I get stuck, James,
Mm,
is it not just part of humanity to treat others with kindness and respect? Is it something that has been lost along the way? Do we blame it on people's ignorance or fear or lack of education or awareness? I just think if we go back, if we go back into time, it's always about kindness
yeah.
for me and respecting an individual as they are for whoever they are or for
Yes.
whatever's going on for them. But as we have this conversation, how could you look back and justify that young 14-year-old James being bullied by people, male or female, that thought James was different, so they needed
Mm.
to pick on him because of his
Oh,
difference.
yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. Well, we know who I'm quoting. Forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Um, only hurt people hurt people. You and I know that.
Mm.
Um, we all like to feel like we're tall trees in the forest. Some people are tall trees because they put, they learn, they grow, they help, they support, they encourage, and there's tall trees. Other people will be the tall tree because they knock the other trees down.
And overshadow them.
Yeah, that's just their modus operandi. Um, I don't know the reasoning behind all of that. I mean, you and I are probably outliers, as are most of the people listening in, where, showing respect, compassion, treating people with kindness, as is innate to us. It's like it's our default state. Whether that's nature or nurture, or probably a combination of both, who knows? Certainly, that was that was what I witnessed growing up. My dad never spoke ill of anyone. I never recognized it at the time. He might say, "Your man's a bit of a queer fella," using that phrase in a different context. But that was about it. My mother might say, "Every duck has its own waddle."
Yeah.
That was about it. Um, uh, yeah, you and I probably have the awareness that if we see injustice, it is heartbreaking, because in this world it shouldn't be still necessary.
Mm.
But we have so much ego stuff that is still being dealt with. I would like to operate from, I would like to believe, and maybe this is just my hope or that little flame that's inside me, I don't know. I would like to believe that globally this is constraint before the next relief, or this is the crucible for a new rising of awareness. I would also believe that, like everything in life, there's a yin and a yang. For every up, there's a down. For every hot, there's a cold, etc. We have to know what confidence is like to feel less than confident. We have to know what happiness is to know what sadness is. Um, the sad thing is that happiness, goodness, kindness, compassion does not sell product, and therefore it is not advertised. And you have despair, fear, murder, monetized and clickbait.
Mm.
And that is desperately sad. And you and I are doing our parts to put a different intention and a different value out into the world. And that's all we can do in the short term.
Wonderful, James. Yeah, it's very reflective. As I said, I could sit here and listen to you speak. I said that to you.
Well, ditto.
Yeah, I just think it's lovely. It's like I can sit back and I'm taking it in, absorbing it into myself, and then processing it, after this podcast is done and going back and listen to this conversation, James, because as I could in your podcast, I know we could have shared hours and hours of conversations because there is so much
It'll
in
just be
you.
the James and Sharon series,
We
part
absolutely we
four.
should have a television program because we'd be very animated as well. Yeah,
Oh, I don't know. I don't.
I think, James, what I feel is there's still so much of you you're revealing, which I think is beautiful. And I know Brian, your wonderful husband, knows much more and every other side of you as well. But I feel like there's more of you being revealed continuously when you said, this is when you were talking about changing or readjusting or
Yeah,
reassessing. It's you're recognizing yourself in the work that you're now sharing with others. And what I could really hear is the connection, because it's the connection with yourself and that
yeah,
authentic connection with your online members in your community and your podcast and even in the
yeah,
work you do. And I feel so much. I think that's why I feel that connection with you, James.
yeah. It's funny, Sharon, because I had my this monthly membership live gathering was this morning,
Yeah.
and I am so nervous before that. I am not nervous rocking and rolling up, to do a day with 20 people on presentation skills or something. I love it, and I'm fully alert and present with it. Um, uh, but I'm not as nervous. And I had to get curious around that. And the reasoning I came to was that I'm not hiding behind 10 tips on this or corporate speak or how would I say it? It's not me they're interested in, but like my members have joined because they're interested in me, and I'm still going, well, why would they be interested in me? Are they not just more interested in what I can do for them? And that's still a very live issue that I'm working on. Um, um, because there is a vulnerability to that. Um,
Good.
um, and it is good because I've learned that that is a signpost that this is all evolving as it's meant to evolve, because that's where the richness and the joy and the synergy and the growth ultimately is. And that's what I want. That's what I want. And it's like that analogy of when we're on the edge of our comfort zone, we can feel, the security guards at the end of comfort zone are worry and anxiousness. And it's like I'm learning to befriend them a little, because it's like, oh, James, you're at the cutting edge here. This is where life's exciting. And I'm going, great, that's fine for today, but tomorrow I'm coming back here for a bit of a rest until we go out forging the path forward again. And that actually reminds me of a quote I came across a while ago, and it only came into my awareness again this week, and I think it's a very relevant one. It's one of our friend Brené Brown's, and of course she
Mhm.
has many, but she said nowadays we're all both the map maker and the traveler.
Mhm.
So if we're looking to follow our own authentic paths, there may not necessarily be a pre-described map out there. It's like we're going to have to draw the map and follow it ourselves. And that takes me back to images of the great explorers of the
Mhm.
past, going into new lands to see what they can discover. And that's exciting.
And it brings me back to the point that you said you had to go across the world and end up in Manly, Australia, in a bookshop and how to be your life coach to figure out, and I think those journeys, whether they be inward or outwardly, that we're always going to learn something about ourselves. And in creating that map, whatever it looks like, even if it looks messy and you don't have that, where it is, the direction, where is it going? It's following your heart,
Which
and
is the compass, if we keep the analogy going. What does it
absolutely,
feel like? It's like be the adventurer in your own life.
yeah. I remember years ago looking at the sky and remembering as a child looking at the clouds, and we could create anything from a puppy white cloud or even the grey ones, and that as adults we stopped imagining. And I think we need to go back and reimagine what life could be like for us if we allowed ourselves to have that joy and freedom and
Yeah,
playfulness
dream
again.
again, dream again. There's often the thinking that the gap between where we are now and where we'd like to be in whatever context, where we are now and where we would like to be, starts as a visualization gap because I can't visualize something different.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll use that in a work type scenario where people are looking at maybe forging a more equitable work-life balance. But if you cannot visualize what a more equitable work-life balance would be like, how are you going to create it?
Mhm.
But that's true of other things too. Can I,
Mhm.
and of course, if we think about, we do visualizing all the time, Sharon, we
Mhm.
just call it negative visualization, and that's known as worry. Worry is negative anticipation of the future. And my goodness, we have enough external feedback to give us the negative anticipation of the future. But but maybe just for balance, could we do a positive anticipation? Could we do a positive visualization? Because we will have so much evidence that supports that as well.
Mhm.
How things fell into place, or, I was in the right place at the right time, or, I don't like overusing the word manifestation, but I know how it works and I do it, or I
Mhm.
won't say we don't do manifestation, it's an extension of who we are. But it all starts with a little bit of curiosity
Mhm.
as to what I would like to have different, even if I don't know the whole amount, because you won't. Um,
Mhm.
the adventure is the progression. It's the great Martin Luther King Jr. quote of faith is taking the next step, even though you cannot see the staircase.
Mhm.
Uh, Let me get curious around the next step.
I love it. And I would say to that next step that sometimes it can be the hardest one because when we move forward, it can feel like, just as you said, you're on the edge of that cliff, and it's like a leap of faith. But it can also be very exciting, and you don't know where it's ever going to lead you.
Yeah, yes, because you will hear your heart beat in your chest.
You'll know you're alive.
You know you were alive. It's like,
That's me and James running up the mountain, so excited but scared shitless at the same time.
but that's the cutting edge of life. We're not talking about being reckless here, Sharon. We're just talking about getting curious as to how, as adults, we can have a little bit more fun, a little bit more excitement, and a little bit more adventure. That's something when myself and my brother played as kids. My mother said, "What are you playing?" "We're playing adventure.
Yeah,
We're going out on an adventure." As adults, I think we need a little bit more adventure.
absolutely. I think your life has been an amazing adventure to date. To date, I'm talking about to date. I also think it has been a place where you've had to hide part of your essence, your true essence, James. But even in that hiding of your essence, it has flowed out through your achievements, through your books, now through your podcast, and it'll flow out to your community members as your very authentic and real and truest self. Because I see it and I feel it from you. And
Thank you.
as we work with others, we sense that honesty and vulnerability within them. And it's a hard thing to do, but we're learning. We're also learning.
Yes.
James and I are also learning.
All the time. Sometimes I'll go, it's like, I don't need another lesson, please. There's a phrase I came across recently. A lovely man who's on my podcast in a few weeks' time spoke about a book by, I think the author was George Leonard, but the theme from it was, Sharon, was like, what was it? Loving the plateaus.
Mm.
Just the normal, everyday, nothing special going on here.
Yeah.
Because so often we're looking at, well, what's next, or growth, opportunity, what am I working on, all of that sort of stuff. But can I just really learn to savor the everyday ordinariness of life?
Mm.
And that's something that I'm paying a little bit more attention to, um, because we sort of think they're they're everyday, but they're so special, and they're the ones that we can often take for granted. Not the highlight reel, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just the everyday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Savor the plateaus, savor the everyday ordinariness. It's not about the doing, the going, the getting all the time. It's that old cliche of doing less and being more,
Mm.
which is probably how would I say it? It's probably the my mantra for this decade.
Good. Because again, for you in particular, the doing more, you have done so much. And as you look back to your own health challenges,
Mm,
and you had to stop and you had to be patient and you had to be compassionate, you look back to the pandemic and your business, you know, being gone,
yeah, gone.
changing.
Yeah.
That was out of your control at the time. So you have to sometimes sit back and lay and rest. And what I have seen from people that have had serious health challenges is they sometimes just wish for the mundane days.
Yes. Yes, that's true. That's
They
true.
wish for the just sitting
Yeah.
with a cup of tea in
Yeah.
their own garden, in their own
Yeah.
house, not having to be driven or drive into
Yeah.
hospital for tests, for treatment. That sometimes to be in the ordinary is extraordinary.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mm,
Echo that 100%. Yeah.
yeah. James, when you spoke to your younger self and you met him for coffee at 18 and you told him you loved him and you told him he would face many challenges, but that he would excel and that success is the best revenge in many ways, but that you were to face other challenges
Yes.
within your own personal life and find a different path, but find the love of your life, get married, share conversations with a beautiful lady called Sharon Fitzmaurice that change your life.
Of course.
But you told him all of that. If he was sitting beside you now and listening to your beautiful honesty and openness and vulnerability, and he'd heard you talk about your fears, your joys, what do you think he'd say to you now?
Goodness. That's a question. Very, very few times am I lost for words, Sharon. Um, uh, oh, I want something more profound than this, but this is what's bouncing into my head. He said, "Rest, you deserve it."
Yeah.
Um,
You don't have to try so hard.
yeah, it's there's something true in that because I can feel it.
Yeah.
Rest because you deserve it. I know I have, and I only came across the phrase of it very recently, is productivity anxiety. So if we're not being productive, if I'm not being productive, I'm anxious.
Mm.
And if I'm not being productive, I don't feel I've earned the right to rest. Now, I know that is bonkers,
Yeah.
but knowing it and living it are two different things. Having said that, I know I'm making progress with it. I've used the phrase that certainly over the last few weeks I was able to move down the gears a little. Again, some of that was forced upon me with medical stuff. The dermatologist didn't like a mole on my back in July, and that had to be removed, and I had stitches, and thankfully it was benign and no further treatment was needed this time. But it sort of knocked me out of normal routine. I wasn't able to go to the gym. I wasn't able to go to yoga class, and the stuff that
Mm.
part of self-care routine, as it were. But I have really loved the ordinariness of days in the last few weeks. And I've loved being maybe in second gear and knowing that second gear was absolutely fine for today.
Yeah.
And knowing where I've come from, that's, I won't call it a leap forward because I mean that makes it still sound like progression or achievement,
Mm.
but it feels like progress in my evolvement, as it were. Because just as we speak about going back to the younger self, I also have a very clear image, Sharon, of the future self. Yeah,
Mm.
all of them still live within us. But my future self, I always have an image of him just waiting for me at the end of a forest path. And he's very gentle and very quiet and is very bemused by me, I think, a lot of the time. It's like, James, are you still doing that? Come on, you know. But it's sort of waiting for me to not quite evolve into him because he's already here within me, but he's getting closer.
Mm.
And that goes back to the visualization gap maybe from earlier. I have a I have a clearer sense because it's not just a vision thing, it's a feeling thing. I have a clearer calibration of how I would like to feel more frequently in myself going forward. Less of what I call the frantic James who's scurrying around and trying to
Yeah.
organize this, that, and the other. And I can do that really well. I'm world class with it. I'm still a beginner with, it's not quite, oh, shrugging my shoulders and things will work out. It's not quite that. It's letting go and letting God, as Wayne Dyer beautifully said. You
Mm.
know, so my younger self would say to me, James, rest, you've earned it, but rest is not an inactive state. It's a gathering space. It's a resourcing space. It's a resourcing space. Um, and yeah, that's a nice little piece of wisdom to give myself, Sharon. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's so beautiful as well. But I think he'd also say to you, thank you for showing up for me.
Yeah, because I was his future self.
Yeah. And you had to keep showing up, even
I
when,
kept showing up. I
yes,
keep
you
showing
did.
up.
Yeah.
I keep showing up and I will keep showing up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just have the image of the older brother who I never had. Sharon, I'm reaching for a tissue.
But I think you need to hear that,
Yeah,
yourself.
I'm reaching for the friend
Yeah.
who I needed
Hmm.
at 14, 16, 18, 20, 30.
Yeah.
I have him now. Like I have my, that aspect of me and I have
Yeah.
it with Brian as well. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's powerful. And I appreciate you saying that.
No.
And you can't get any more vulnerable than tears on a podcast.
Well, for me, it's not to, make you
I
vulnerable.
still no, but what is that phrase? Tears are love's overflow. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of love in it.
Yeah. Because again, I just feel like I'm getting to know you more and more through each of our conversations and just through listening your podcast and even, reading your book. Words to Inspire by James Sweetman.
Doesn't he look good in a
He looks
photo?
amazing,
The the
fabulous.
the,
He
the
looks
gas
better even in person. And when you're talking to him,
in
he gets
color.
even more handsome.
The gas thing is for someone who was supposedly on a sabbatical. I wrote that when I was on sabbatical. I mean, that was the downtime. But what I discovered though was that when I gave myself permission to rest, I I found myself connected with my creativity in a way that surprised me because it was so fast. It was like I thought, oh, I'm going to be stretched out watching daytime television for 2 months or something. I don't know, or baking banana bread or whatever it was. But it's like, no, I felt I'm looking to create something here.
Mm,
And that book came out of the 10 months or so that I took off. And I loved producing it. I loved the little, it's like not a big novel and
yeah.
stuff. Like it didn't require the head wrecking, thinking and strategizing and whatever. It's like I'm choosing a topic. What flows on this? Let's polish
Mm,
it a bit. And I love the creativity of it. And I am a writer, so I loved writing, just like a singer loves singing, writers
mm,
love writing, and there was huge joy that went into it. And I'm not so good at selling and promoting books or whatever else. That ain't my forte. Just let me create them. Let me
mm,
create the podcast. Let me create a PowerPoint deck or whatever. That's sort of my sweet spot, the creativity. And certainly one of the things I've discovered that if we're looking to feel a little more fulfilled in our lives, and that's something that we all want, um, perhaps route one for that is the exercising of our own creativity in whatever way feels most joyful to us, whether that's making a meal or putting an outfit together,
mm,
writing a few words of a limerick, who knows.
mm.
But the exercising of the creativity is one of the main ingredients in fulfillment. And my writing of that refueled me and filled me full. If I use that fulfillment, move it around a bit,
Mm.
it filled me full again, Sharon.
Yeah. And also in that creativity, it's an expression of who we are, an expression of our soul, the soul that is maybe hidden behind the titles and the roles that we play in life. And when we write, it is more an expression of who we truly are and how we want to show up for ourselves now and for others in the world. And that's why I think your younger self is saying, thank you for showing up for me, because I think you're still doing it for him and
Yes,
for yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I know. And it's this conversation has prompted me to just have a few more chats, not necessarily on a podcast, with my younger self, because I used to think that from whatever wisdom I have now, I can go back and give him what he didn't have at the time.
Mm,
And there's an element of truth to that. I can be his big brother and
yes,
friend and confidant. But of course, it's the yin yang of life. So I know he has a lot to teach me,
you sure have.
um, which is the less obvious part of it. But if we spoke about adventures earlier, let that be an adventure as well, not some sort of heavy thing. Oh, I'm sitting down to do some inner child work. No,
Mm,
let's have a half a day together and go to the beach with the dogs, and
yeah.
because I know, and I think I said it on that episode. I met my younger self for coffee. I would have encouraged him to have so much fun because he did not have that much fun as a teenager or a 20-year-old. He was too busy working and he was too busy hiding. I never had my teenage years or the rebellion or any of that. But now, of course, there's all this trend of what you call it, middle essence.
Yeah.
The second rebellion that comes in your 50s. And it's like, yeah, we're breaking out again. And I'm all up for that.
I'll meet you at the beach with your dogs and your younger self, and we'll put on some 80s tunes and have a good old
Oh, well, 80s
dance.
are the best. I say anything after 92, I don't listen to it. But anyway.
James, I'm not, you are a gift. I mean that. You truly are a gift to the world. And again, I always say, like any gift, you're opening up and there is this beautiful paper inside, and then you're opening up and the excitement is coming. I think you've so much more to show to the world and give to the world in everything you do. But these conversations that I've had with you have been a gift to me. So I am really,
Oh,
really
well,
grateful.
well, thank you, Sharon. Right back at you. Um, this chat has been very meaningful to me. I have shared things I have never shared before, um, um, but a very comfortable space, and our intentions are very clear. And if anyone listening in finds what we have shared resonates, well, then our job is done.
Yeah.
It's the ripple effect from that, and we never need to know where that goes or what happens with it. um but we do what we do, because we can,
Mm,
and we're very fortunate to be able to do it.
mm,
And um let people take it, and and sort of get curious as to what resonated with them and what can they run with. I often say, if I'm doing a talk or something, it's like, you've gotten all of me here, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Take what you wish, what you
mm.
have found helpful and useful, and then you run with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take a lot, as I always do from our conversations. And I know, like we said when I was on your podcast, I think we're going to have many conversations, James, in the future. There's so much more I want to talk. And again, I am conscious of the time, but I really am grateful, heartfelt. Thank you to you. And again, if you had not reached out,
There you go.
we wouldn't be having these conversations. So you took a step forward and created something that you had no idea where it would lead for both of us. And that's why I believe you are a gift, because it just keeps opening for me.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said. And I really appreciate that, Sharon. And I really appreciate not just what I've learned from our chat today,
Mm.
but for you holding the space, because you do that beautifully.
Thank you, James. And you know what? I hold space for you anytime, James Sweetman.
Oh,
Anytime.
if I'm anywhere near your neck of the woods, you will be getting another email from me.
Oh, I love it. I
And then I'll
love it.
show up and see what's in your kitchen cupboards.
Oh, Jesus, never forget cleaning. Oh, that was just wonderful. So as I said to James, I could just stay talking to him forever. I just love feeling at ease in his company, and just the honesty and the openness to me is that's the realest conversation. They're the best conversations ever, ever, ever. But please do check out jamessweetman.com and his website. You can find him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, his podcast, Your Time with James Sweetman, and check out Meeting Your Younger Self at Coffee at 10:15 that I have spoke about and probably will speak about many times. And his new book, Words to Inspire. This is an amazing book, and there is many different. I have a lovely message from James inside. But what I love about it is you introduce the theme and you go through it, but you also have then reflective or journaling prompts as well that people can use, which I love because it's not just somebody else's words. You have to figure out what that means for you. And please check out all of his other books, your YouTube channel. That's what I mean. There's so many different aspects to you, James Sweetman, that we could be discussing just one aspect of you for 3 days and then move to the next one. We were trying to get it all in, but this was a really, really, for me, a profound conversation, because you showed up.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
And I love that. So, without me going on about James all the time, because you'll think, will she ever shut up? But anyway, please do check out jamessweetman.com. Please go over and follow him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Find out about his coaching sessions. Go on and check out his community membership, which he has just started in the last June, I think he started,
Yes.
wasn't it? And he sends out seeds of inspiration and then live monthly
Yeah.
meetups as well, which is wonderful. And then you'll really get to know James. So I can't wait for the next conversation with James. I'm so
Until the next one, until
until the
part
next
three.
one.
Yes.
Yes. But again, heartfelt thank you to James and to all of you. I do really appreciate you bearing with us. And whatever, as James said, resonates in this conversation for you, hold it in your heart, hold some space for yourself. What does it mean to you when it hits you and you go, oh my God, that's hit me hard? Hold it for a moment. Give yourself that space just to acknowledge whatever it is. But until my next conversation and until next time, take care of you.